You know that moment, don't you? The moment when you've spent 30 minutes preparing a healthy meal, chopped vegetables, balanced protein, maybe even got creative with the presentation, and your 3-year-old looks you dead in the eye, picks up a handful of pasta, and hurls it across the room like a tiny anarchic revolutionary. And you stand there, cortisol flooding your nervous system, wondering where you went wrong. You've read the gentle parenting books, you've validated their feelings, you've offered choices. Do you want the red plate or the blue plate, sweetie? But somehow, dinner time has become a battlefield, and you're losing. Now, let me show you a different picture. A cafe in Paris, 6 o'clock in the evening. A family sits together. Mother, father, two children aged 4 and 7. The children are not on iPads. They are not negotiating their meal. They are not throwing food. They're sitting upright, using their utensils properly, engaged in conversation. And here's the shocking part. They seem content, not oppressed, not anxious, content.
What's the difference? Is it genetic? Are French children simply born more compliant? Of course not. The difference is a psychological framework, a concept so elegant and yet so misunderstood in the English-speaking world that we don't even have a proper word for it. The French call it le cadre, the frame. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why this single concept might revolutionize your family's relationship with food, behavior, and boundaries.
Let me start by saying something important. If you're struggling with your child's behavior at mealtimes, you are not a bad parent. In fact, your struggle likely comes from a place of deep love and intention. You've been told that saying no damages a child's self-esteem. You've been told that imposing your will creates trauma. You've been told that children need to feel empowered, that they need choices, that they need to be treated as equals in the decision-making process. And so, with the very best intentions, you've adopted what psychologists call a permissive parenting style. You negotiate, you explain endlessly, you offer 17 different meal options because you don't want to be seen as controlling. But here's what the neuroscience tells us, and this is absolutely critical. Children do not experience freedom the same way adults do. When we give a child unlimited choices and no clear boundaries, we don't liberate them, we terrify them. Imagine you're standing on a bridge. Now imagine that bridge has no railings. Theoretically, you're free to walk anywhere. You could walk right to the edge if you wanted. But would you feel free? No. You'd feel anxious. You'd walk slowly, tentatively, constantly scanning for danger. Your nervous system would be flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone, because your brain is desperately trying to figure out where the danger zones are. Now, add railings to that bridge. Suddenly, the freedom feels real. You can walk confidently, even joyfully, because you know where the boundaries are. The railings don't restrict your freedom. They create the safety that makes freedom possible. This is what's happening in your child's nervous system when you fail to provide clear, consistent boundaries around food. They're not experiencing liberation, they're experiencing dysregulation. And dysregulated children act out. They throw food, they scream, they refuse to eat, not because they're bad, not because you're bad, but because their developing brain is desperately searching for the frame, for the structure that tells them, you are safe, someone is in charge, you can relax now. When children lack structure, the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, stays activated. They exist in a low-grade state of anxiety. And anxiety in children doesn't look like anxiety in adults. It doesn't look like worry. It looks like defiance. It looks like food on your wall.
So what is le cadre, and why does it work so beautifully? Le cadre translates literally as the frame. Imagine a beautiful painting. The frame doesn't constrain the art, it contains it, showcases it, gives it definition. French parents think of their role in exactly this way. They provide a very firm, non-negotiable frame. These are the boundaries, the rules, the structure. But within that frame, the child has complete freedom. Let me be very clear about what this is not. This is not authoritarian parenting. Authoritarian parents say, "Do it because I said so," and they control everything, including the child's emotional expression and internal experience.
That approach does create compliant children, but it also creates anxious, resentful children who struggle with autonomy as adults. Le cadre is authoritative parenting. It says, here are the non-negotiable boundaries. Within these boundaries, you have agency, choice, and respect. The difference is profound. In the context of food, here's how it works. The parent decides what is served, when it is served, and where it is served. These are the frame. These are non-negotiable. But the child decides whether to eat and how much to eat. This is the freedom within the frame. Do you see the elegance of this? You're not forcing food into your child's mouth. That would be authoritarian. But you're also not running a restaurant with a custom menu for each family member. That would be permissive. You're providing structure and trusting your child to regulate their own appetite within that structure. This approach is backed by decades of research by the psychologist Ellen Satter, who calls it the division of responsibility. And it works because it aligns with how children's nervous systems are designed to function. Children are biologically programmed to seek structure from their caregivers. When we provide it clearly and calmly, their anxiety drops, their cortisol levels normalize, and suddenly mealtimes stop being a war zone. French parents understand something that we've forgotten in our modern child-centric culture. Respect flows both ways. Yes, we respect the child's autonomy over their own body and appetite, but the child must also respect the parent's authority over the household structure. It's not a democracy, it's a benevolent leadership model. In children, when they feel safely contained within a clear frame, thrive. So how do you implement le cadre in your own home? Let me give you 3 concrete, actionable steps that you can start today. Step 1. Establish menu authority. Stop asking your child what they want to eat. I know that sounds harsh. I know it contradicts everything you've been told about respecting children's preferences. But hear me out. When you ask a 3-year-old what they want for dinner, you're asking their prefrontal cortex, the rational, decision-making part of their brain, to do a job it's not yet equipped to do. The prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. Your toddler doesn't have the neurological infrastructure to make good nutritional decisions. That's not an insult to your child, it's just developmental reality. Moreover, when you make your child the authority over the menu, you place a burden on them that creates anxiety. They don't want that responsibility. They want you to be the leader. Here's what you do instead. You plan the meal. You prepare it, you serve it, and you say, calmly and warmly, "This is what we're having for dinner tonight." Not as a punishment, not with rigidity, just as a simple statement of fact. If your child says, "I don't like that," you respond, and this is crucial, with empathy but not negotiation. You say, "I understand. You don't have to eat it, but this is what's for dinner. You can choose how much you'd like, or you can wait until breakfast. Notice what you're doing here. You're holding the frame, the boundary around what food is available, but within that frame, you're giving total autonomy. The child chooses whether to eat, how much to eat, which items on the plate to try first. That's real freedom. That's respectful. And paradoxically, when children stop feeling pressured to eat, they often eat more willingly.
Step 2. Eliminate grazing and establish meal structure. Here's the second piece of the frame, and this one is going to be difficult for some of you. No snacking between meals. I can already hear the objections. But my child gets hungry. Yes, they do. That's the point. Hunger is not an emergency. Hunger is a biological signal that regulates appetite and behavior. When children graze constantly throughout the day, crackers at 10, fruit pouches at 11, cheese at 2, they never experience true hunger. And when they arrive at the dinner table, they have no appetite and no motivation to try new foods. But there's something even more important happening neurologically. Constant snacking creates constant dopamine spikes. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of anticipation and reward. When children eat frequently, their dopamine system becomes dysregulated. They're never truly satisfied, and they're never truly hungry. They exist in a state of perpetual wanting without fulfillment. French children typically eat 4 times a day: breakfast, lunch, a small afternoon goûter, snack, and dinner. Between these times, the kitchen is closed, not as a punishment, but as a structure. And because children know that food is coming at predictable intervals, they relax. They don't panic about hunger because they trust the system. When you establish this rhythm, and it takes about 2 weeks for a child's body to adjust, you'll notice something remarkable. Your child will arrive at mealtimes actually hungry, and hungry children are motivated to eat what's in front of them. The food throwing stops because the oppositional behavior was never really about the food. It was about the lack of structure creating anxiety. Step 3. Teach table manners as social respect. The third piece of the frame is perhaps the most culturally foreign to modern Western parenting. You teach your child that mealtime is a communal event governed by social rules. In France, even very young children are expected to sit at the table for the duration of the meal, to use utensils appropriately for their age, to say please and thank you, and to engage with the family. This isn't about creating tiny aristocrats. It's about teaching children that they are part of a social unit and that social units have norms that everyone respects. When we allowed children to eat while running around, while watching screens, while playing with toys, we send a message: your individual entertainment is more important than our collective time together. We don't mean to send that message, but children are concrete thinkers. They interpret behavior literally. Instead, the frame here is simple. We sit together, we use kind words, we try not to make a mess, and we stay until everyone is finished. Within that frame, children can absolutely express preferences, talk about their day, even decline foods they don't want, but the social container remains intact. What you're doing from a psychological perspective is teaching emotional regulation through co-regulation. When a child sits with the family, their nervous system begins to sync with the calm, structured environment you're modeling. Mirror neurons fire. They observe how adults handle disagreement, how they use utensils, how they navigate conversation. This is not oppression. This is socialization, and children crave it.
Now,
Let me prepare you for what's going to happen when you start implementing Le Cadre. Because if I don't warn you, you're going to think it's not working and you're going to give up. In behavioral psychology, there's a phenomenon called the Extinction Burst. When you change a pattern that a child has learned to expect, they don't quietly accept the new pattern. They escalate. They test whether you really mean it. Here's what this looks like in practice. The first night you serve dinner and calmly say, "This is what we're having," your child is going to lose their mind. They're going to scream, they're going to cry, they're going to push the plate away and demand mac and cheese, because that's what's always worked before. And this is the moment where most parents cave, because the tantrum is so intense, so distressing, that we think, this can't be right, I'm traumatizing my child. But what's actually happening is that your child is testing the frame. They're asking, in the only language their dysregulated nervous system knows, is this boundary real? Can I trust it, or is it going to disappear like all the other boundaries? If you hold the boundary, not with anger, not with rigidity, but with calm, loving consistency, the tantrum will peak and then decline. Usually within 3 to 5 days, the extinction burst passes. Your child learns, oh, this is the new structure. I can relax now. Here's the script I want you to memorize for when this happens. I can see you're very upset. It's okay to feel upset, but this is what's for dinner. You don't have to eat it if you don't want to. I'll be here when you're ready. Notice what you're doing. You're validating the emotion. I can see you're upset. You're giving permission for the feeling. It's okay to feel upset, but you're holding the boundary. This is what's for dinner. And you're offering connection without negotiation. I'll be here when you're ready. This is not the same as ignoring your child's distress. This is co-regulation within a firm structure. You're present, you're calm, you're empathetic, but you're not movable. And that combination, empathy plus consistency, is what rewires the neural pathways that were created by the old permissive pattern. Most parents never get to see what's on the other side of the extinction burst because they give up during the storm. But if you can hold steady, what emerges is remarkable. A child who trusts you, who feels safe, and who eats without drama. Here's what I want you to understand as we close. Implementing Le Cadre is not about becoming a stricter parent. It's about becoming a clearer parent. Your child doesn't need you to be their friend. They don't need you to be a short-order cook. They don't need endless choices. What they need, what their nervous system is crying out for, is a confident, calm leader who provides structure so they can finally relax and just be a child. The paradox of boundaries is that they create freedom. The frame doesn't restrict the painting, it allows the painting to be fully expressed. When you provide a clear frame around food, around meal times, around behavior, you're not limiting your child's autonomy, you're giving them the psychological safety to develop true autonomy. You are a good parent. The fact that you're watching this video, the fact that you're seeking solutions proves that. You're not looking for shortcuts, you're looking for wisdom. And that's exactly what Le Cadre offers. Not a trick, not a hack, but a framework rooted in decades of psychological research and centuries of cultural wisdom. So tonight, when you serve dinner, take a breath, decide what you're serving, serve it calmly, hold the boundary with love, and trust that your child's nervous system will, in time, sync with the structure you're providing. They might not thank you now, they might not thank you for years, but one day, when they're adults sitting at their own table with their own children, they'll understand. They'll understand that the greatest gift you gave them wasn't unlimited choice, it was a frame strong enough to let them grow. Thank you for watching, and remember, you've got this.